Thanks everyone for joining me. I'm so excited to talk to Linda. It's Lowen?
Lowen.
Lowen, I got it. Yes, again.
Yay.
We've had other conversations about traveling, and I saw that she has a book called 100 Things Syracuse. And upstate New York, there's so much to explore there. I mean, I spent an autumn there and I couldn't pack it all in. There's little pockets and towns and historic spots. So we'll talk about that first. And then I know she's got a little workshop retreat. Sounds like a great gathering that she's putting together that I'd even be interested in. So welcome, Linda.
I always love talking to you, April, because you know what? You see the world through a different lens. Nudge, wink, wink. Yeah. As a photographer and I'm a writer. Well, you write too, but
Yes.
years ago I was a photographer. I couldn't do it now. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Too, too many bells and whistles, too many programs to fool around with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just it's
Yeah.
probably like writing. I mean, writing's probably changed some too. I mean, you've got this chat GPT and AI
Oh,
stuff floating around.
oh yes. Oh yes. That is a conversation in and of itself.
Right. So what inspired you to write the book about Syracuse?
Well, actually, I had the writer's dream is that the publisher comes to you and says, "Hey, would you write a book for us?" So, 100 Things to Do in Syracuse. Where is that book? I had
Yeah.
it conveniently positioned. There it is. Ta-da. So actually, oh, look at that.
Oops.
Oh, it has to be right but where my
Right by
face
your
is.
face.
Oh,
Yeah,
right by
there we
my face.
go.
Okay, there we go. So this book, all I have to do is put my finger over it, and it's 100 things to do in blank.
Yeah.
So there are this book in some form or another exists in 100 other markets in the United States. A company called Reedy Press out of oh look at that. A company called Reedy Press out of St. Louis contacted me and said, "We hear that you are a Syracuse-based writer. Would you like to write about your hometown?" And I said, "Sure," because my hometown is too small to have, photos from or Lonely Planet write about us. So I said, I'll do the book. And even though it's called 100 Things to Do, I have 227 named items in the index. And also, too, because where I live is sort of bookended by places that people, I shouldn't say, "Ooh, this is a diss to Syracuse." I love Syracuse, but I was going to say actually travel to. More people probably know about the Adirondacks of New York State, and more people probably know about the Finger Lakes, which
Yep.
is wine country. So where I live, north is the Adirondacks, west are the Finger Lakes. So I had to stay in a very concentrated area, which was basically my city and a few outlying environments. And that's how I ended up writing the book. And also, too, I was approached to write the book in May of 2021. And of course, we were just coming out of COVID. So I literally did visit all of the places that I
Oh,
write
wow.
about just to make sure, are they open? How's their service? Because again, remember, we were all struggling to eat out, not
Yes.
enough wait staff. So yeah, so it was sort of like, it was sort of like being tested on my hometown and going out and studying, doing the homework. So this was the result. And I'm happy to say it actually is now in its second printing. So
Oh, it is. Oh, that's
yeah,
great. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it did very
Yeah,
well.
what a great project though to be asked to write a book about your
Yeah.
hometown and, you know, go
Mhm.
check it out, have a project. That sounds fabulous. So, were there parameters in selecting some of the places you included?
Well, the hardest thing I think, and this is the thing that always amazes me because we were talking about this earlier. You run tours, and to make decisions for people, like I wouldn't say I'm a particular eater, but hey, I'm Japanese. I do prefer Asian foods. I'll eat Thai, I'll eat Indian, I'll eat Japanese, Korean, Chinese. But when people say, "Well, where should I eat?" and that becomes sort of like, well, I don't want my personal bias to enter into the picture.
Oh,
So what I did was I had a list of 25 questions that I asked. Is this place worthy? Number one. Number two, is this uniquely Syracuse? As in, a lot of people in their hometown, they may not appreciate their hometown and they may say, wow, I had such a good dinner at X. I forgot that I was in my hometown.
right.
That's not what this book is about. The places are uniquely Syracuse. You're in central New York. So I made that a priority. The other thing, too, though, oddly enough, Syracuse does show up on Food Network, the Travel Channel. some of the gourmet magazines because there are interesting pockets, many of them fueled by immigrant culture.
Hmm.
And a if a restaurant showed up in a prominent media position like Food Network, yeah, it pretty much did make it into the book because that is sort of the imprint. It's like the Good Housekeeping
Yeah.
seal of approval. The world thinks highly of it, so who are you, Linda Lowen, to diss this place? So it was included. Yeah.
Right, right. And Syracuse is, I kind of looked again on the map because I had to refresh my geography of where it sits. You're right, it's close to the Finger Lakes. You can go up to the St. Lawrence Seaway. There's a lot just outside of it. But how long would you suggest if someone wanted to make Syracuse like a travel destination?
So I will say this because I have lived in every corner and pocket of New York State, and being half Japanese, I did have relatives who came when I lived in New York City, relatives who would fly into New York and they would say, Empire State Building. I want to see Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty. They would say, Niagara Falls. And so for many people, they make the drive up the New York State Thruway, which is just basically a giant L. And Syracuse is conveniently located, not quite halfway, a little bit further, but it's a great stop. If you're going to do New York, you're going to want to do New York City, and then you're going to want to do Niagara Falls. Syracuse is a good stopping place for a couple of nights, I think I would suggest. Why? Because you get close to history, you walk the Erie Canal, you get to see some of the places where, the way stations of the Underground Railroad. A lot, and we're very close to Seneca Falls, which is where the whole,
Oh yeah.
women's rights comes from. So yes, we're in a good spot to learn a little bit about history and to enjoy. It's a beautiful community. And then, of course, what can I say? It's dirt cheap here.
Well, there you go.
It's dirt cheap. Yeah.
And that's what I think people are going to be looking for this summer is some budget places
Yeah.
to go
Yeah.
and stay. Has Syracuse been able to maintain some of its historical buildings or downtown areas? Because many towns, things get old, and in America, we just like LA, we just bulldoze it down and build something new.
Right. So one of the restaurants that I mentioned in 100 Things is a place called Possibilities. Isn't that a great
Oh,
name?
that is.
Possibilities. So they were one of two places that you might go down into what was once a seamy part of town, Armory Square. But they poked a toe in that particular pool, and now Armory Square is the place that everybody goes on the weekends. In fact, they close off streets to the area because it's really kind of, Syracuse enjoys its warm weather because we do get quite a bit of snow. So when you block off streets, it's almost like, I can't quite call it Mardi Gras. My husband came back from New Orleans and he said,
Yeah.
well, but it's as close as we're going to get because the restaurants are, the bars, and even Syracuse has a symphony which is called Symphoria, and they even perform downtown. And it's just an incredible place to be on weekends or even the weeknights in the summertime and all year long. But most people don't want to visit Syracuse in January. I don't know. They don't like snow. Sorry, no
Yeah.
snow. Yeah.
But it sounds like a beautiful place in the summer and maybe not quite as hot as some of the other areas.
We are always a stone's throw from a fantastic lake or waterfront, and it's, I would just say it's not too bad. I looked at a chart of like where one should be living in terms of
Oh,
storms and water and global temperatures. For the next 50 years, Syracuse is totally golden. Buy your property now.
there you go.
Yeah.
Next, you'll be selling properties. I can see it now.
Well, actually, Syracuse got this massive, massive. I'm not kidding. It's a Micron. They're going to be building microchips in Syracuse, and the company is investing. I'm not kidding. 100 billion in the economy. So it's been said that in the next 20 years, I mean, how do you measure that? 36 gas stations will be needed to fuel all the cars of all the people moving in. There's a feeling that Syracuse may grow as much as 50% of its current
Wow.
size.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's huge. That's a
yeah.
big change on the horizon.
It's a giant change for us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what other books do you think you may write? Do you think you'll do another guidebook like this
I
or?
have another guidebook that is at the publishers right now. It's called Secret Syracuse, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. And so it's a book about the odd things that happened in this city and in the areas nearby. And I don't know, have you ever heard of something called the Cardiff Giant? It was a giant stone man that was dug up on the outskirts of Syracuse, and P.T. Barnum tried to
Oh,
buy
that's right.
him. Yeah, and tried to buy him, and then a whole bunch of Barnum and other shysters started to build their own Cardiff men and display them. So that's something that happened here. There's actually a very popular community, a neighborhood, which is built on an old munitions
Oh.
factory, which kind of mysteriously opened during World War II, was operational for a year and then shut down.
Hmm.
And then everything was plowed under. And now very nice homes are I don't know if I don't know if many of the residents know that. I mean, it's not a
Yeah.
secret, but you don't necessarily want to know what happened in your house before you move in. So when I tell people, I say this neighborhood, and they say, "Oh, really?"
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And that's just it. There's lots of areas like that in the United States, well, and around the world, but especially I think in the United States, you're building your home might be on native
Hmm.
grounds
Hmm.
or burying grounds, nobody marked. I mean, so yeah, digging out the secrets and the hidden places, I'm sure was a
Yeah.
fascinating journey too.
Yeah. I also found out that Syracuse was actually the home of America's first supermodel at the turn of the century, the turn of the century being the 19th to the 20th century. So that was a fascinating story. That's the first one that opens up Secret Syracuse. And supposedly she had been taken by her mother to a seasonal encampment down by the railroad tracks, and her fortune was read at 5 years old that she would spend and lose thousands. And
Wow.
yeah, she had quite a life, quite a life.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
love this, all the different stories. And then you do other writings as well.
I do. I primarily teach memoir writing. And because people get to a point at which they say, I'd like to tell my life story. And I always say to people, writing is the one thing that everybody thinks that they can do.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, if you were going to have work done on your sink, you'd call a plumber who is experienced. If you are involved in a lawsuit, you're going to call an attorney who's been to law school, and your surgeon had better have gone to medical school. So the same thing I say, study a little, take some writing
Yeah.
classes, learn how to tell your story in the best way possible. We all have great stories. I am convinced that everyone has a story in their past that would be book worthy. But the thing that they don't necessarily know how to do is, how do you tell it? How do you frame it? How do you shape it? Because stories have structure in the same way houses have structure. There's a reason why we don't live in tents, because they're flimsy and they'll blow down. Same thing with our stories. If we're going to write a book, wouldn't it be great to know how to structurally build the foundation
Yeah.
of your story, erect the walls, give it shape, and then finish it? So that's what I do. I teach that.
See, I think that's fabulous because I think you're right. A lot of us think, oh, we'll just start writing down some words. And even talking to people, some people are such great conversationalists. They rope you in, and pretty soon
Mhm.
you're leaning in, eager to hear what happens next. And other people, they'll just be talking, and you've already tuned out after the first couple seconds.
Yes. And this is the other thing that is very difficult to understand. You can tell a great conversation in a group, but you may not be able to put that down on paper, because the way we hear stories and the way we read stories are radically different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do. So one of the things that I've been doing, I had to put it on pause during the pandemic, but I basically bring women writers, small groups of women writers, to seaside houses in the off season in coastal communities, and I give them writing intensives for a week. And I have found that I really like to teach in community. I mean, I have taught classes on Zoom and face to face in classrooms, but I like living with the people people who I work with, because there is an intimacy that comes, and there's a trust.
Yeah.
Because if you can trust the person who is teaching you writing before she's had her cup of coffee, and you can see the sourpuss that she is, you can probably trust her with your most heartfelt feelings, and she'll help you shape them. So that's my motto. But yeah, I do keep coffee. I do keep coffee nearby.
Right.
Yeah, there's my. I have my water bottle and I have my coffee at all hours of the day.
Oh, I do too, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm like, you're. It's like when I sat down, I'm like, oh no, I can't. I didn't have time to make a fresh cup of coffee, but I'm the same way.
Yeah.
But I love that idea of teach. You're teaching, but you're in community, and I love that because people learn differently. I know that when I take photographers too, you start to figure out how do you show someone something, or how do you get them to craft a story, because many of us already come in thinking, I can write this, and
Yeah.
being a writer or a coach to someone that's trying to write their story, you're trying to improve it. And sometimes in that improvement process, you have to point out some things that they might not want to hear.
And that is one of the things that I do, because the other thing that I do aside from teaching is I am a professional book reviewer. So whenever you read a bestseller and there's a blurb from a place called Publishers Weekly, that's what I do. So I'm not blurbing Stephen King. I actually read adult memoir. And I also now read children's, and oh wow, children's literature,
Oh,
especially today,
really?
is fascinating. So I get to write 200 words and say what I think of the book. I mean, this crazy big-haired woman in Syracuse, New York, not in the power centers of Los Angeles or New York City, but here I am in Syracuse reading books and giving my opinion. So I would say this: I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, and people will argue with me and say, yeah, but I read a lot too. Oh yeah, but you read the books that people have already said, oh, that's good, read that. when
Yeah.
you're when you're 3 paragraphs into a book and you think, wow, this is not good, and you still have to read it, every single word, there's no skipping. People say, why can't you just skip it? Because somebody spent years of their lives writing that book, and then it's being reviewed by one of the big names in book reviewing. And
Right.
am I going to dismiss their work just because I think, no, everybody deserves a fair shake, every single word on every single page, and I read it, and then I weigh
Yeah.
in. So I bring that kind of intensity to the work of my students. And I can also say, hey, I think that'll sell. And I know what I'm talking about because I do this for a living.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
I also say to people, I say two things. First of all, free advice is it's worthless because you don't have skin in the game, financial commitment. And number two, I say to somebody, okay, do you want the hard edit? Because I will give you the hard edit. It may make you feel anxious, but it's not that I'm criticizing you. It's that you have something on the page. I can see it, but you're not presenting it in the best possible form. I mean, it's not unlike traveling. You can't bring that many clothes in that big a
Right.
suitcase.
Right.
You got to get it down to travel size, and then they'll let you on the plane. So that's
Yeah.
all it is.
Do you feel writing has changed in the last 10 years, even 15 years? Because I know as a person, when I was working for a company, we often had to rewrite things to make them more concise. People were reading less. We make an offer about a free app, and all they see is free phone. And so,
Yeah. Writing has changed, and how we interact is different. I think that it's no surprise that audiobooks have exploded, partly because most of us don't have lives of leisure in which we can sit down and do this. It's
right.
just we don't have that bandwidth. So a lot of times I subscribe to audiobook things, and I also subscribe to an online source that not only gives me as many books as I can read a month, but also audiobooks. And yes, it's different because I think our attention spans are different. In the old days, you had a lot of time and a lot of what I would say real estate to set up things and create moods, and now it's like
Right.
boom, you got to be right there. And how do you know whether a book is successful? If it goes to one of the streaming services, like I read a book this summer because a friend suggested it. Oh, The Last Thing He Said.
Oh,
And then,
uh-huh.
of course, now it's on Netflix with Jennifer Garner, and the guy from Game of Thrones is the husband. And I read that and I thought, wow, they set everything up very quickly. But I've studied so much that I can see, in other words, I can see the mechanics of writing. Certain things are mentioned, and then of
Right.
course they come again at the end, but they're the things that break your heart. You always know where the story's going.
Oh, yeah.
The little tiny details are the things that break your heart. So that's also what I teach. I teach writing structure. I teach people how to find those little, I call them gold coins. How do you find the gold coins? How do you drop them throughout the story so the reader can go along and collect and say, oh, what a treasure I have at the end.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Fabulous. So I know you have a retreat coming up that we wanted to talk about.
Yes, so I teach here and there. I like to, in this situation, I'm just a hired hand, but I okay, I cringe to say it because it sounds like a scheme, right? This is a place at Pyramid Life Center. It's up in the Adirondacks. So if you look
Hmm.
pyramidlifecenter.org, uh, there's a women's writing retreat. I believe the dates are the 16th. It's a Sunday to a Friday.
Okay.
And so it is at an old children's camp and a church camp. So you're sleeping in bunks. You know how bunks are.
Yeah.
Sharing a bathroom. You're walking to the cafeteria for your cafeteria meals, but you get 2 hours of classes in the morning. They're each an hour and 15 minutes. There are like 8 different instructors.
Oh, wow.
So you get room and board and instruction, an incredible private lake. There's no other houses or anything on it. You have access to kayaks, there's swimming, there's hiking, all of this for $365.
I know it's got to be the best bargain. I mean,
It's the best bargain, but bring bug spray, bring a flashlight. There's no air conditioning.
okay.
And you gotta hoof it. You gotta hoof it. It's on the side of some pretty hilly areas. The cabins are rustic, and there's no Wi-Fi, people, and no
Okay.
cell phone service. So there you go. And most people say, no, not for me, not for me. I need my cell phone. You
Well,
could
what
you
about
can
meals? Are we going to be making s'mores at night or?
You know what? There are bonfires, and usually, if you want to read your work, there is an opportunity to sign up for sort of like an open mic where people
Yeah.
people share their work. But being a book reviewer, that's the other thing. I can't shut that down. So they all know that you'll never see me there because I'm busy reading and reviewing books. I take my work wherever I go. I'm one of those losers. Loser.
No, no, it's just keeping up with all those books that you have to read. I mean, that's just time consuming in itself, but
Yeah, and I had to put all that on hold to write a book. So I could not do both simultaneously. When I was writing Secret Syracuse, I literally ran away from home. I left Syracuse and I went down to the coastal Carolinas,
oh,
and I
nice.
wrote a book in 48 days. Yeah.
That's quick. Wow. But
Ye-
just that focused intensity.
Well, when your publisher says this is the deadline and you don't meet it, that means you won't get another book. So you'd best, it's writing is a job just like anything else. And if you think, well, how many times I'm not feeling particularly legal today, if you're an attorney or a paralegal, I'm just not going into work. Can't do that. I same way. I can't say, oh, I don't feel particularly creative today. Nope. You sit down, put your butt in the chair, and you write. So,
So back
yeah.
to the workshop briefly. Is it open to anyone who's never really sat down and written something or?
Absolutely. In fact, the interesting thing about the Pyramid Life Center is they have different programming throughout the summer. And this particular group, so it's called the Women's Writing Retreat. They label it WWR, but it's the Women's Writing Retreat. And a core group of women over 20 years, maybe 25 years ago, got together and created this writing retreat. And so this, many of the same women have been coming back again and again and again. One of the instructors, I'll mention her, Ellie O'Leary. She is a poet, but she started writing while she was at Pyramid, enjoyed writing poetry, and ended up getting her master's or MFA.
Wow.
So, but a lot of people they come together and they're there are intense writers who are focused and who publish. There are more casual writers who come for the socializing, but it's a nice welcoming group. I would say probably if you were 24, you might not find it because it is an older group. I'd say most of the women are 50 plus,
Okay.
but it's a, you know what, for that price, $365 for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then classes Friday morning. You cannot beat
Yeah.
that. It's a great way to try an inexpensive writing retreat and see if this is for you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And maybe if you are younger, just if you keep that in mind that you have older mentors or,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're going to unplug and focus because I think that is a big challenge for many of us is just there's
Mhm.
so many distractions. We want to do this and we want to create that. And so we're all over the map. So to be forced to no Wi-Fi, get
Yeah,
rid of,
no, you know what? The unplugging is a big thing, but boy, you do not miss it when you wake up and you hear the loons calling across the lake. And when you wade up to your chin and you look at your toes and it is crystal clear water. Because as I said, this is completely privately owned by Pyramid Life Center. There's nothing else, and there's nothing else around there, and it's their own lake, their own private island. And when you stand there on the beach, it's got the most extraordinary mountain which just kind of rises up and then just drops suddenly. So if you go to the Pyramid Life Center website, you'll see this and you'll say, oh, I want to go there. And that's how I found it. Literally, it came up, I think, 5, 6, 7 years ago on a Facebook ad. And I said, I'm going to go there. Back then it
right?
was 265 a week. So, yeah, way before the pandemic. And I just thought, I'm going to give it a shot because it's so inexpensive. And it's got to be, I mean, it's been happening for years and years and years. But I'm one of these people who I will be adventurous as long as writing is involved. That sounds weird, doesn't it? Yeah, as long as there's writing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can probably take your writing, but yeah, you having that space to write and connect with others is
Well,
probably
I have not yet seen anybody writing while bungee jumping or anybody writing while ziplining. So I figure writers, kayaking and hiking to a waterfall is doable. And anything beyond that, yeah, I don't write on roller coasters either.
no.
No motion for me. So yeah.
I don't ride on roller coasters anyways anymore, so that's out. But you will be doing some instructing there too. You mentioned.
Yes, so what I'm doing is I'm teaching a class called A Splash of Flash, because this is the thing that people may not be aware of. Flash fiction and nonfiction, which are short stories of 1,000 words or less, are very popular. I have taught writing of 100-word stories, 200-word stories, 500-word stories. And in this class, it'll be up to 1,000. So it's good for fiction writers. It's good for nonfiction writers. I mean, it's not really geared for poets unless you are a narrative poet and you don't break up your lines and you just kind of mush it together and you call it a story. But yes, that's what I'm teaching. So that is every morning. So you'll get plenty of time with me, and I will have had my coffee. So I will be pleasant. And since we're not sharing a house together, I won't scream at you, get your dishes out of the sink.
Right.
I'm usually the one who leaves the dishes anyway. So, yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So how many people do you think are coming to this?
You know, this is a good question because before the pandemic, I remember going there on a particularly crowded year where there were 80 people there. And
Oh,
it was to the, I mean, it was, but I think now it's probably going to be in the range of 40 to 50. That's what I
okay.
imagine. And, excuse me, if you sign up, you'll probably get a bunk bedroom, but it'll be all to yourself. You'll share a bathroom and you'll be in, like some of the bigger rustic housing actually has wings. There's like a living room in the
Oh,
middle, and then there are like 5 bedrooms this way, 5 bedrooms that way.
it's
It's
just
Yeah, and one of them is like you sleep in the library. Another one you sleep in the nurse's office, the nurse's cottage.
all right. Well, I'll pass on the nurse's cottage, but the library sounds amazing to be
Yeah,
surrounded,
yeah.
what a
hmm
pleasant
hmm
place.
Fun stuff, fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have some tips for people that I think a lot of people they see these books, a thousand places to eat or a thousand places to go. It's kind of become a
hmm
catch-all for different
Yeah.
things. Do you have tips for someone that wants to write something like that? maybe for their
Well,
own travels or whatever they might.
what I would suggest is that you have to try very, very hard to think about, in other words, you have to, I always say Zen mind, beginner's mind. When you go to a new city, what are you, excuse me,
No,
what
go
are
ahead.
you particularly interested in when you go somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize what the answer is, then you can apply that to your own city, because you have to think, somebody coming to my hometown, what are they going to want?
Right.
And your usual round of, like, I always, when it's Friday night and my husband says, where do you want to go? I say, oh, let's go to the Indian restaurant, because the Indian restaurant's close. The Indian restaurant
Oh,
has, but again, it's 2 miles from my house. So I told people it's my favorite restaurant. I didn't put it in the book. Why? Because a lot of people don't like Indian food.
right.
And, we get into these habits. Some people
Yes.
might call them ruts, but this is where you should think about, if you want to illuminate understanding of your hometown. Obviously, you're going to stay away from any chain restaurant,
Yep.
but you are going to think about who's been in this community quite a while, who's got an interesting backstory about how their restaurant developed. Like this place, Possibilities. They were in a part of downtown that nobody would go to. And here we are decades later, and it is the hopping spot. In fact, Armory Square, which is part of the Syracuse downtown, has this resurgence of people now living downtown. I think there was a discussion. I went to a group, a leadership group here in town. I talked about the book and talked about places to go. And they had said, several years ago, I don't know, a couple decades ago, there were 12,000 people living. I'm sorry, 1,200 people living downtown. There's nobody living downtown.
Yeah.
And now we have over 5,000 people living downtown, which is
Wow.
quite a. And again, this was a downtown that had a lot of office buildings, which are now, of course, being converted into apartments and, big lofts and gorgeous views. And yeah. So think about what it is you'd like to have in your hands going to a different city, and then apply that thinking to rediscovering what you have in your hometown that others would enjoy.
That's a really good analogy. It's a really good
Mhm.
thought process because you're right. We do fall into these ruts of
Yeah,
our favorite restaurant, or we put our likes onto it. Like you said, if
mhm,
we really enjoy sushi, we're going to focus on the sushi restaurants, and that not may
right.
not tell the story of
No.
that community at all.
And the other thing that I would honestly say is, never think that you're going to get away with reading everybody else's reviews or opinions. You, in the same way I say, well, I have to read every single word in the book from cover to cover, you owe it to the proprietor, to the wait staff, to the, front of house, back of house, the chef in the kitchen. You owe it to them to walk in and actually have a meal or meals, because I found in writing Secret Syracuse, a lot of the things that appeared in Secret Syracuse was because every town has ghost stories, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these, haunted this, haunted that. I found that in doing the research, every single website, copies and paste, copies and paste, copies and paste, all the same spooky stories. So I actually went back to old newspaper archives. The headless
Yeah.
man, was there actually an accident that happened on that road? So I read, old accident reports, old police reports, things like that. So, I did the digging,
Yes.
but a lot of times when it comes to social media and the hot, buzzy new restaurant, everybody's just repeating what one person said. And you know what? You can be a taste maker, but you have to go and taste it yourself. Don't rely on somebody else's opinion.
Yeah.
Wow, I just kind of contradicted myself, didn't I? Because here I am saying, because you want to write a book where somebody's going to rely on your opinion. But again, your opinion is rooted in the actual feet in the door, butt in the chair, knife and fork in your hands, food in your mouth. That's what you want to do. And how do you replicate that experience? By the sensory details: taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound.
Right. And really being able to craft that into something that's interesting and compelling, and be open-minded that what you like may be completely different than the bulk of people that have never been to this place, where they would see it
Yes.
through different eyes.
Yes. And the other thing too is that everything is a story. So when you are writing about a place, and again, travel writing isn't about griping and getting back at people, but what it is there are problems and there are solutions, and there's the underdog. Oh wow, I had a really lousy first course, but can they make it up in the second and third? And will dessert really rock my world? But again, you have to see this as a continuous narrative,
Right.
and you are kind of pushing the emotional buttons of your readers, because ultimately, how do we get through every story? Is there a happy ending? Does everybody go away satisfied and ride off into the sunset with a full tummy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So this was super interesting. Where can people find your books?
Oh my, you know what? I would say you could find my books just by going on any site that sells books. 100 Things to Do in Syracuse Before You Die. If you type into Google Syracuse, New York, travel tourism book, I will come up. Why? Because there is no other book.
Yeah, that's
That's pretty
great.
easy. That's pretty easy. Yeah.
That's
And
nice.
Secret Syracuse comes out in the fall, I think in September. So
Oh,
if you have
nice.
any connections to Syracuse and you want to gift somebody the book, it's also, I you'll appreciate this, April, because I did hire a professional photographer to be my photo editor. I
Oh,
did
did
not
you?
try to go it alone. Yeah, because every entry is going to have between 1 and 3 photos, maybe 5. So with 84 entries in the book, I didn't want to shoot with my phone, because
Yeah.
again, you know what? I'm not respecting the artist, and the artist is the photographer, because my words are great, but people love good pictures. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
They really do. And sometimes that's what draws them in when they're flipping through and deciding
Yep.
where to go if they have a weekend to spend in Syracuse. And
Yep.
what a great companion of books, though, to make a weekend trip or part of a longer trip in New York. It sounds amazing. And the workshop, we need to shout out where people can sign up.
Okay, so look up Pyramid Life Center. So this is the interesting thing. If you turn up several pyramid centers, it's in a place called Paradox, New York.
Oh,
Paradox. I know, right? Yeah,
yeah.
Paradox, New York is the
Wow.
home of Pyramid
That's a
Life
story
Center.
right there, how they even got it. There's
Yeah, it is. So for people who know New York State and a little bit of the Adirondacks, if you take the north way up, it's near a place called Scroon Lake, or Shroon. It looks like Shroon, but it's Schroon. That's the nearest famous Adirondack lake. But Pyramid Life Center is in Paradox, and it is Pyramid Lake. But you'll people will find it. They'll
Yeah,
find it.
they'll
Yeah,
find it. And I'll put
they'll
the
find it.
links in the show
Okay,
notes as
great,
well. So they'll have
great.
all of
Thank you.
that. And they'll have access to your Syracuse books. And wow, this has been super exciting. I'm so excited that you're sharing about the books and the writing. And
Well, thank you for shining a spotlight on tiny little Syracuse, New York, home of snow and basketball. We appreciate you.
well, you're welcome. So, what's next? I guess that would be my last question. Do you see another? You shared the book that's coming out. Do you
Hmm.
think you're going to do a springtime workshop? I know right before we got on, you were, eh,
I am so I have been basically running a program called the Snowbird Writers Retreat.
ooh,
So there will be 5 weeks that I will have an oceanfront house, 2 towns down from Myrtle Beach. I tend to stay in a community called Murrells Inlet, which is the seafood capital of South Carolina. And I bring writers in. They come in on a Sunday, they leave on a Saturday. And sometimes I do instruction, that costs a little bit more. Sometimes I say, hey, you're on your own. And I pick you up at the airport and I drop you off. So it is easy. It is easy, but you have to
wow.
cook for yourself. I'm not cooking for you, but
Okay.
I'll make you coffee in the morning. So,
I saw some pictures of the last beach house. So it looked like the location was fabulous. So,
you know what? I can say this from the living room. You can stare right out and watch the waves break on the shore. It's quite beautiful. Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Linda, for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
April, you are sunshine in every traveler's life. So thank you.